Hey guys, it's Ryan here. So earlier this year, another Dragon Ball Z game came out, and it's pretty well received for the most part. But imagine at some point in time, we could never get any of this series in the West. Well, in this video, I decided to explain and talk about some of these unique gems. I hope you enjoy.
First, we have Dragon Ball Z Gokuden Kakusei Hen for the Super Famicom. This came out in 1995 and was developed and published by Bandai. Now, despite many of the Dragon Ball Z games being fighting games, this is actually an RPG, but it's nothing like the Final Fantasies or Dragon Quest you might be familiar with. It kind of mixes up elements of a text adventure game with a visual novel. You'll mainly be on an overworld map throughout the game, reliving the Dragon Ball story up until you defeat the evil Demon King Piccolo. Just like with the manga and anime, you'll interact with a majority of the characters you know from Dragon Ball, including Master Roshi, Bulma, and Emperor Pilaf. Throughout the game, you will come to many crossroads and will have to make a decision. Sometimes you will avoid a battle if you chose correctly, but other times not really much changes aside from what the characters say in response to your actions. There are special times that you will be stuck in a maze and you will have to navigate between north, south, east, and west directions. These can be a massive pain because without a map or indication of where you are, you will get frustrated on what to do. If you have a companion with you and feel stuck, you can press X for their advice, but if you are alone, you just might be screwed. I even had this happen to myself once. So when you go to Master Roshi's house for training, he said he'll only do it if he's brought an attractive girl. Well, since Goku hasn't a fucking clue what a girl is until he pats their genitals, this was made even more difficult because I had to use trial and error and screw up enough times to trigger another scene. The combat is very strange compared to what I've played from other RPGs. You and your opponent will be placed on opposite edges of the screen. Over time, each of you will move toward the other, and when someone reaches the center, this will allow you to use a move. Now, if your opponent gets to the center before you, he will flash and unleash an attack. In that short window, you must hit the B button to block the attack, or you can combine the B button with a directional button to perform a different maneuver. Unless it's a dodge, you will still take damage from blocking, so look out. While you're flashing, you can perform a basic punch or kick. You can also utilize some power to perform a Kamehameha or use your Neo Bow. Your power is charged by holding the right and left shoulder buttons, but you can't move while it's charging, so you need to be strategic about when to charge and when to not. So you keep exchanging blows back and forth until someone collapses on the floor in defeat. Between each fight, you can pause the game and go to a menu that lets you assign a move to whatever button layout you want. At the start of the game, you don't have many options to choose from, but as the game progresses, you will have more freedom to choose the moves that work best. Another odd thing about the combat is that you don't level up, so to speak, but Goku will announce after a battle if his health or powers increased. I gotta say, this game really makes you feel like you're reliving the Dragon Ball story. Many of the major events in the story are played out just like you would expect. I mean, there's a cutscene that shows Master Roshi launching his Kamehameha wave to put out Mount Frying Pan. And as you would think during the fight with the Rabbit Mob boss, if he happens to touch you, that will happen. Even the humor of Toriyama's work is present in this game. This is just one example of how funny it can get. To sum it up, this is a great game that every Dragon Ball fan should check out. It's not a 100% complete translation though. I noticed there's still a bit of text in Japanese, like the names of certain things, but is really well put together. Next up we have Dragon Ball Z Kyoshu Saiyajin for the Famicom. Now this is also an RPG, but it's nothing like the game that I just previously mentioned. It actually uses a card system for battle. Yeah, I really love card battles mixed in with Dragon Ball. So the story follows the Saiyan saga from Dragon Ball Z. You and Piccolo start out the game trying to defeat Raditz and save Gohan in the process. You begin your adventure at Master Roshi's house, and you need to get the Dragon Radar from Bulma in order to track down Raditz. You use cards for pretty much everything in this game. At first the card system is a bit overwhelming, but I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Each card you have in your hand has two values and a symbol in the middle. The top value is the attack power. It ranges from 1 to Z, which happens to equal 8 in this game. The bottom value is your defense. When someone is attacking you, the defense value is subtracted from the attack of your opponent. So say when it's your turn, you decide to pick a card with a 6 defense value, and your enemy uses a card with an 8 attack value. After the calculation is done, you should take minimal damage. Now say you attack with a Z value card against an opponent with a 2 value defense. In that case, you're going to lay on a lot more damage. The symbol in the middle of the card represents the element. If the element matches the symbol of the character using the card, then they will get a slight power boost when attacking. Now, if you happen to get this symbol on your card, you can utilize a special attack by using up your BP, which I assume stands for battle power, but who knows. First to have their hit points taken to 0 loses. Now, one of the big issues with this game is the way you move throughout the map. Instead of simply moving a certain amount of spaces each turn, you have to use your cards. The higher the number, the further you can move. Now, this is all dependent on what values you currently have in your hand. And keep in mind, your party actually shares the same hand on the battlefield as on the overworld. So this usually means your higher value cards are going to be used in battle, while on the overworld you'll end up using smaller value cards to slowly move toward your destination. This actually works in your favor because at the start of the game you can die very easily. I'd highly encourage you to stay with your entire party in the beginning. If you're more than one space away from each other before an encounter triggers, you will end up being all alone. And on top of that, you can face off as many as 5 enemies during a single fight. So if you're by yourself and you're too low of a level to fight, expect to lose unless you luck out and manage to escape. You might have noticed on the bottom of the cards, the values are not translated to English numerals. I suspect that is having to do with the process of hacking the game, and switching out sprites is a pain, so they decided to leave it in. These are Japanese characters, and I know many people don't know Japanese, so I made this image to help in playing the game. Now after some time, you'll get used to the combat system, and you might actually think you can take down Raditz. Well, unless you're over 1000 BP on each character, he will probably one-shot you. You could grind up enough from the weaker enemies to get there, but it will be quite a grind. Another problem I countered was that there was almost no experience scale to fight on par with Raditz. From the starting area to where Raditz is located, everything gives practically the same experience. At the most, I think I had a fight with a Saiyan and 4 Cybermen give me 15 experience per person. At that rate, it will take hours and hours just to beat Raditz. The grinding is so bad it might actually be worse than the first Dragon Warrior game. The strength of your characters upon leveling up might raise, but all I can tell is that their maximum hit points and energy increase. This combat system still doesn't condemn the game to a bad summation, but it could be much better. There are some interesting things that you can do on the overworld, like going to houses where Princess Snake will offer to heal you, or locations to find Dragon Balls at. There are these spaces on the map that go to a minigame screen. Unfortunately, they aren't translated into understandable English, so I can't explain any of them. You can even obtain special cards from battle or by looking at key locations on the field. Each card depicts a character from the Dragon Ball universe, and they each have their own effect when activated. Some of them can only be used during the overworld segments, or others in battle. The descriptions for the cards I can't really make out, but for starters, the Yajirobe card is used as an attack on the enemy, Shenron is used on the field in order to heal everyone completely, and Korn is used for healing a single person completely. Now, even after all the complaining I've had about this game, I'm still pretty impressed with the graphics, and especially the animations during battle. I didn't think this kind of thing was even possible on an old Famicom game from 1990. Overall, this game is still recommended to all Dragon Ball fans out there. Just be prepared to clear out your schedule for hours of grinding. Up next, we have Dragon Ball Z, Bu Yu Retsuden for the Sega Genesis in Japan. And this was also released in France on the Mega Drive. You heard me right, this is actually not a Japanese exclusive game. Talking about this game kind of goes against my own rules, but this is the only Dragon Ball Z game released on the Genesis. Also, I doubt any Europeans are watching now, so I'll just go ahead with my script. As you can see by the footage you're watching, this is a fighting game, which is pretty typical from the series, but this is one of the earliest ones I could find, and it came out in 1994. You choose among 11 fighters, including characters like Goku, Krillin, Piccolo, Frieza, and Captain Ginyu from the events of the series. Each character you play through has a unique story that aligns with them in a kind of what-if scenario. At least that's what I think it is based on my research. You see, I found a translation patch for this game online, but I can never get it to play properly without the emulator crashing on me, so what you see is actually the original Japanese version of the game. A lot of the gameplay is comparable to the Butoden series on the Super Famicom if anyone out there has played them. Each fighter is opposite one another on the stage and can utilize basic punch and kick combinations. By pressing the C button, you can stay in the air to perform sky battles. You can also do super moves by inputting the right commands in quick succession. Now, since this is all in Japanese, I couldn't really understand the move list for the in-game menu, but fortunately you can search for all the characters' moves online, so it really shouldn't be an issue. I think maybe the controls are just a bit too stiff to perform some of the more advanced moves. but that could just be on account of me sucking at fighting games. For the most part, the game isn't too hard, but at first I thought it was pretty unbalanced because every person that I was facing low-kicked me to death, until of course I realized that I could spam the same shit at them. Then the game became much easier. Another thing I noticed is that you cannot perform certain moves unless you're a set amount of distance from your opponent. Now this rule usually applies to the more powerful attacks like the Gallic gun or the special beam cannon. Even when you are far enough away from your opponent, you can still get a bit flustered that your move won't activate, even though you're inputting the combo correctly. But with enough practice, it'll be all so satisfying killing that bitch that kept you from victory 6 times in a row. Son of a bitch! Now, one unique thing about this game is because of the techniques the programmers used, you can go off screen and really get some distance from your opponent if you're feeling the heat. Now, the Genesis wasn't really known to do this kind of trick with its hardware limitations, but doing things like a vertical split screen with scrolling I think adds authenticity to the game. I mean, the way you can launch a Kamehameha from the ground at your enemy with a center split screen looks so much like a strip taken right from the comic. The graphics look quite good for Genesis. A lot of detail was put into the fighters and stages. The music it's okay, it gets the job done. I don't really expect much for music in a fighting game, especially one this old, but it works out well enough. There is a tournament mode in this game also. No shit, right? Every DBZ game needs at least a tournament mode, but for some reason my ROM won't allow me to play it. I'm not really sure why that is, but I'll just assume it's fine. Lastly, there's a 2-player mode for you and a fellow Dragon Ball Z nerd to play with. Overall, this game is rather competent for its time, and it is a worthy addition to the franchise. Now, why would you play it when Dragon Ball FighterZ exists is a bit beyond me, but it is a fun game. So now I've talked about 3 Dragon Ball games straight from the past. They were definitely worth playing and would have been enjoyed by those who tried them when they were brand new. So I must ask, why were they left in Japan?
The answer this time around is actually pretty simple, especially if you're a fan of the series. Well, these games didn't come out simply because the series wasn't out yet in the West, specifically the comic book and the show, but that changed about in 2001 where it started premiering the original Dragon Ball on Cartoon Network. But prior to that, the only US released Dragon Ball Z game to come out was Dragon Ball GT Final Bout on the PlayStation, and that came out in 1997, I think like July. Now, depending on who you actually talk to amongst the fans of the community, that's not even considered canon, so who knows when the actual official Dragon Ball Z game first came out. But it is sort of a shame that the series didn't come out sooner, or else we probably more likely would have gotten these games like on the Super Nintendo and NES and Genesis and what have you. Now, there's kind of a little bit of a rabbit hole you can dig to find out why exactly the series took so long to get westernized, but I don't really want to get into it right now. Probably save it for another time, or you can just look it up online. But with all that being said, there is one more Dragon Ball Z game I wanted to talk about.
At last, we come to Dragon Ball, Dragon Daihikyo. Now, what's interesting is this game was not actually made by Namco, nor does it have anything to do with Namco, which is unlike many others in the series for the time. It is the first Dragon Ball game ever released, and it came out on the Super Cassette Vision in 1986. For those who don't know, the Super Cassette Vision was a home console that was released mainly in Japan and produced by Epoch. In 1981, its predecessor, the Cassette Vision, took over 70% of the home console market. When Nintendo's Famicom came out, the Super Cassette Vision was made to keep up with the advancing hardware. Unfortunately, the Famicom dominated in popularity, and the system was discontinued in 1987. As for the game itself, it's sort of a top-down, vertical-scrolling shooter. Goku rides his flying Nimbus while fighting what seems to be bats and birds, but I think they might actually be Piccolo's minions. It's kinda hard to tell. You can shoot a Kamehameha and you can swing your Neo Bow to take down anything in your way. There are multiple levels to play through, and each one has a hidden Dragon Ball to collect. The graphics are rather nice, and it constantly plays a bit version of Makafushigi Adventure in the background, so it really shows the charm that the show had. You can grab food to rack up a high score, and you can also grab a familiar friend nearby to help you out. You get a minimum of 3 lives, but I assume you can earn continues if you're good enough. Sad to say, I can't show a lot of the game to you because I'm pretty bad at it, but there is a reviewer who's covered this game with more depth if you care to check it out. It still amazes me how early this game was made. I mean, when this came out, Dragon Ball was just starting pretty much. It also amazes me I can even play this game in any form at all. The Super Cassette Vision is so obscure there's not even an emulator made for it. Fortunately, you can play it online via archive.org. I feel like this game was kind of predicting something great, even back then. Now keep in mind, this was only released about 2 years since the original comic started serialization, so even back then, before it was a worldwide sensation, Dragon Ball was already getting on those sweet, sweet licensing fees. If only Toriyama knew how far his creation would go after all these 36 years. Toriyama-san, you are a fucking legend. As always, thanks to these people who made this review possible. And if you have a Japanese game you want me to talk about, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.